بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. So this is an ongoing class, the 99 names of Allah. And for those of you who are joining this class for the first time, this class, many people have written about this topic from an Aqidah perspective, whether that Aqidah is from Ahl Sunnah or from other than Ahl Sunnah. So instead of repeating what the scholars, both the contemporary and the classical scholars have done, which is just going to be a repetition with some minor addition or some minor omissions, I've decided to take a completely different approach, and that is both from a psychological and emotional perspective, to see how we can seek comfort, solace, and happiness through the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how we can make a connection in our daily life through the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Quran is full of describing the names and the attributes of Allah. In fact, the scholars, when they divided the Quran in terms of its content, they found that 1/3 of the Quran contains the names and the attributes and the qualities of Allah. So it only makes sense that we pay 1/3 of our attention to this topic. 1/3 of our seeking of knowledge should be about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at the bare minimum. And when it comes to fiqh, when it comes to the commandments of Allah, when it comes to like the do's and the don'ts, there's only about 600 verses of the Quran relating to it, or a little bit less than that. So yet you find people who are delving more into that and forgetting about recognizing and knowing their Lord. So it is important that we know who is Allah. It is important that if we are going through any hardships, any distress in our life, that instead of seeking, or in addition to seeking help from, let's say, medical professionals or from experts in that particular field, whether you're going through, let's say, a depression, in addition to seeking comfort or help from psychologists and psychiatrists, then the best way to seek help and comfort is through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by recognizing some of his names and making dua to Allah that is the most pertinent to that particular situation you are in. And we find that the prophets, all of the prophets, they made dua to Allah through his names, especially the name that was more pertinent to their situation. So we will find some of it in our class today. For example, the dua of Zakaria when he wanted a child. What type of name did he use to ask Allah? Also Ibrahim alayhi salam, also the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he would seek Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In fact, some of his du'as that we find in the Fortress of a Muslim would mention several names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, but unfortunately, we only know maybe a handful, maybe 5 names, Allah and Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim, and that's about it. 3 names, 5 names, maybe Ar-Rabb, right? But we really don't know some of the other names that are equally important for us to know, in order for us to unlock the treasures, the infinite treasures and bounties of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَلِلَّهِ الْأَسْمَاءُ الْحُسْنَى, to Allah belongs the most beautiful names, and these names are complete and they are perfect. And then he says, فَدْعُوهُ بِهَا, so make dua to him through them. So it only makes sense that if Allah is saying that to Allah belongs the most beautiful names. So ask dua, what does that mean? That means you recognize what you already know what you need. So recognize which of the names of Allah is pertinent to your situation. So go ahead and ask Allah through that name or through several of His names. So the last place that we left at was Al-Qadir, Al-Qadeer, and Al-Muqtadir. Just a really quick wrap up, we just did the introduction of it. We found that these three names of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala are very close to each other, and that's why we included this in the same chapter, in the same section. So Al-Qadir, Al-Qadeer, and Al-Muqtadir. So if a person wanted to name any of his sons, they could say Abdul Qadir, Abdul Qadeer, Abdul Muqtadir, the slave of the all-powerful, the slave of the ever-capable, and the slave of the one who is perfect in ability. And we found that there is, though they share the same root letters, yet their application is the meaning, both the linguistic and the technical meaning, is just a little bit different from each other, not too much. For example, Al-Ghafir and Al-Ghafur, we already talked about those names, and we found that they both allude to the forgiveness of Allah, but in different ways, in different amounts. The same thing with Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim. Now over here, Al-Qadir. Al-Qadir is the one who does what he pleases based on his decreed wisdom. Based upon his decreed wisdom. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in chapter 77, verses 20 to 23. Chapter 77, verse 20 to 23. Allah, He says, did we not create you from a worthless water? Then we placed it in a place of safety, meaning the womb, for a known period. So we did measure, and we are the best to measure. So over here, it is being translated as, so over here, Qadir. Allah, He's using the name Qadir, which means that linguistically, it means to measure. And we already mentioned over here that these names, they allude to the one who is perfect in his measurement, and who is perfect, and because of his perfection in measurement, that also makes his qadr, which is also the same root letters as Al-Qadir, Al-Qadeer, and Al-Muqtadir. So the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is also perfect as well. So Allah, He says, فَقَدَرْنَا فَنِعْمَ الْقَادِرُونَ, and we are the best to measure. Al-Qadeer is the one who has perfect and complete power and ability. He has the power to bring the creation into existence. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in chapter 22, verse 6, in chapter 22, verse 6, Allah, He's saying, that is because Allah is the truth, and because He gives life to the dead, and because He is ever capable over all things. Allah, He is ever capable of bringing life to the dead, just like how He was ever capable of bringing life to something that never existed in the first place. So over here, Allah, He is demonstrating His name and His attribute of Al-Qadeer. And also in chapter 2, verse 148, Allah, He says, wheresoever you may be, Allah will bring you together on the day of resurrection. Truly, Allah is able to do all things. فَأَيْنَمَا Allah, He says, truly He is able to do, in Allah ala kulli shay'in Qadeer. Allah is able to do all things. Al-Muqtadir is the intensive form of the root, which adds the element of absolute power that no one can stop or oppose. It refers to His supreme power to actively enforce whatever He wills and decides according to His wisdom. Now, Al-Muqtadir is the one whose might is great, and through his overwhelming power, he controls all of his creation. Allah, he says in chapter 54, verse 42, chapter 54, verse 42, they denied our signs, all of them, so we seized them with a seizure of one exalted in might and perfect in ability. كذبوا بآياتنا كلها فأخذناهم أخذ عزيز مقتدر. So we will go ahead and mention the name of Allah over here, and then its linguistic as well as its Quranic meaning. What does Allah say about these names? Allah doesn't mention these names and does not give us Allah doesn't mention these names and then does not give us its meaning according to him, right? So Al-Qadir, even though it comes from the same root letters as Qadr, it doesn't mean decree or predestination. So what does it mean? And that is what we try to do. And then in the benefit section, we will see how we can benefit from these names in our daily life, how we can ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through his beautiful, that particular beautiful name or names. So since since we know that Allah, he knows everything that goes on in this world, and he's the one that decrees for everything to happen, nothing happens in this world except that Allah knows. There is no one that speaks in this world except that Allah listens to their speech. There's no one that makes dua to Allah except that Allah hears their dua. There's no one that is in distress except that Allah, he knows their innermost secrets, even if you don't talk to anyone. So we should never doubt the power and the abilities of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If we are facing any adversaries in our life, but if we have firm faith that we have Al-Qadir and Al-Qadeer on our side, then we will be able to overcome any adversaries, any adversities, any problems in our life, knowing that you have Al-Qadir and Al-Qadeer on your side, the one who is perfect in ability, who has the power to remove it from you. Allah, he says in chapter 26, verse 61 to 62, in chapter 26, verses 61 and 62, Allah, he says, and when the two companies saw one another, meaning the people of Musa and the people of Fir'aun, when Fir'aun was chasing Musa and Bani Israel, when they were being driven out, when they were fleeing from Fir'aun's army, so they came to the a dead end, which was the Red Sea, right? So then they faced Musa and said, we are going to be destroyed. So Allah, he mentions that, and he says, when the two companies saw one another, the companions of Musa said, indeed, we are to be overtaken. And what did Musa? Because Musa alayhi salam, he recognized who is Allah. He says, no, indeed with me is my Lord, he will guide me. He's the one that is going to overpower all of these people with his power and his ability. So this filled their hearts with tranquility. Okay? So, and that is what we need to do. There is nothing, if we believe that Allah, he is able to do everything, and he is the most powerful, and he is the greatest, then shouldn't that bring tranquility into our heart? Shouldn't we trust in Al-Qadeer? He is the one that will give us victory over our problems and our enemies. He will never throw us to our enemies or let us solve our problems alone if we ask him. Sometimes Allah, he lets us He lets us go. He lets us to solve our problems on our own because we do not ask Him. We think that we are self-sufficient. We feel that, you know what, I have these connections. I have power. I have wealth, right? How many people do we know in this world that felt secure in their positions, yet Allah took it away from them, and then we saw their situation afterwards, right? Then they started singing the names of Allah, and they started becoming more pious and trying to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for this and that, right? They started making dua. And that is a blessing from Allah as well. Sometimes He leaves us to our problems in order for us to recognize that we cannot solve our problems on our own. And I mentioned this before, right? That the first person that we should go ahead and ask Allah, and I will mention it in the following name, which is Al-Awwal, which means the first. Right? Allah should be the first one that we should turn to for our problems, and then we can go ahead and seek the physical or other means. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the first one. So if we ask Allah for help through His power and His ability, Allah will never leave us alone to our problems, provided that we ask Him for help. And that is why we mentioned the dua, Allahumma rahmataka arju fala takilni ila nafsi tarfata ayn. Oh Allah, I ask you through your mercy that you never leave me to myself. You never leave the affairs of mine to myself, even for the blink of an eye. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in chapter 6 verse 17, in chapter 6 verse 17, and if Allah touches you with harm, none can remove it but He, and if He touches you with good, then He is able to do all things. So over here, Allah, He is mentioning His name, Al-Qadeer. If Allah touches us with harm, if He inflicts us with a harm, no one can remove it. So if no one can remove it, then why do we not ask Allah to remove it from us? And if He gives us good, then Allah, He is able to do all of this. Meaning, if Allah, He removes the harm from us by replacing it with good, then He is able to do that. So, and I've taught you before that what we need to do in order for us to really look at this verse and understand it, we need to look at it from that particular name that Allah ends the verse with. And then it will make sense to us even more. Do you guys understand? So Allah, He says He is Al-Qadeer over everything. He is able to do everything. So let's view this verse with that particular name of Allah. So Allah, He is able to do all things, and that's why He is able to harm us, inflict harm, and He is able to remove that harm and replace it with good, because Allah, He is able to do all things. Okay? Now, the source of our tawfiq, it means ability to do certain things, especially when it comes to prayers and any acts of good deeds or worship. So what is the source of our ability? The source of our ability is Al-Muqtadir. If He is the one that allowed you or gave you the ability, the tawfiq to fast, that ability, because it is an attribute of Allah, that ability came from Al-Muqtadir, the one who is perfect in ability. Our success in life was a result of him giving us the ability to accomplish it. Now, once you start attributing your accomplishment to yourself, then you will see how people will try to, you will see how people, they go down in their profession. They go bankrupt. Why? Because they were thinking that everything was as a result of them. And we have many examples. One of the examples that is coming from the top of my head is a famous boxing individual. He used to say he's the greatest, and Allah, he inflicted him with a particular disease that would make him shake, and he could not even hold his hand straight. I forgot the name of that particular disease. But and then he realized that. He said, I used to say that I am the greatest, but I realized after this that Allah, He is the greatest. Right? So we should never depend on our ability, because when Allah takes away that ability, then what are you going to do? How are you going to live? How are you going to survive? Then that is the moment when you realize and start attributing what you were attributing to yourself, you will start attributing it to Allah. Now, wasn't that a blessing in disguise for that individual? Wasn't that a blessing in disguise? That even though outwardly it appeared that this individual, he is being inflicted with such a harm, yet it was a means for him to realize and connect back to Allah. So sometimes that is what happens in our life, right? When you depend on yourself, when you start to become arrogant and proud and saying all of this you see is because of my hard work, and you don't attribute it to Allah, then Allah will take it away from you one way or another. And that is from how Allah does so, that is from Allah. We cannot pinpoint a particular way. Allah does it differently with different people, and sometimes Allah uses the same method of taking things away. You find some people who are completely paralyzed and they are unable to even move. Why? Because they said all of this wealth that I have accumulated, it is all because of my hard work. And then that person falls off a horse and he becomes completely paralyzed, right? And then it's up to us whether we are going to recognize that as from Allah. Unfortunately, nowadays we're living in a world that if you were to say, well, this is a result of you being, for example, committing sins, or you being like, people get offended. People get offended, right? So, for example, in this pandemic, you will find some scholars who are saying this is a wake-up call from Allah, right? And then all of a sudden you will have the liberals and all of these people who have no connection with Allah, whether so-called Muslims or not. You will find that they get offended by this. And that tells you how that this a particular situation removes a person even further from Allah, whereas others are brought more closer to Allah. So those people who did not used to go to the masjid now realize the importance of a masjid, whereas other people realize, hey, we can do without a masjid if we have done so for so long. So you will have two completely opposing attitude towards a particular situation. So yes, some people like that boxing individual, it was a positive outcome for him, but others will become more far from Allah. And we ask Allah, refuge from Allah that if He is going to inflict us with any harm, that He removes us even further from Him. So we should always, all of our success in life, we should always attribute it first to Allah, only to Allah. Anything that we have accomplished in life. Now, when we humble ourselves before Him and we show our need and our humbleness before Allah, He will support us. He will increase it for us. But when we rely and when we depend on our own abilities or any of the connections, the political and the economical, financial connections that we have, if we do that, right, then Allah, He will abandon us. Look at what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in chapter 8, verse 59. In chapter 8, verse 59, Allah, He says, and let not those who disbelieve think that they will escape. Verily, they will never be able to save themselves from Allah's punishment. So if anyone has ever done any wrong to you in your life, and you are unable to seek any form of ramification or any form of compensation from any of the from any of the laws available in your land, and you say, "Oh Allah, I leave it up to you." You're unable to seek justice. You're unable, for one reason or another. Maybe you cannot afford to do so. It is costly. Maybe that person is more powerful than you, right? You're unable to do that. So you depend on Al-Muqtadir, because we mentioned Al-Muqtadir right here in this verse. They denied our ayat. Ayat can be translated as verses, and it can be translated as signs. They denied our signs. Who denied them? Those oppressors, those non-believers, those Muslims who go ahead and they deny the verses of Allah saying, do not oppress one another. They denied it, so we seized them with a seizure of one exalted, Aziz Muqtadir, and perfect in ability. So when you rely on Al-Muqtadir, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is a form of comfort for us. That Allah, He said, and let not those who disbelieve think that they will escape. Verily, they will never be able to save themselves from Allah's punishment. Meaning, in this world, maybe they can get away, right? And we have so many criminals, so many people in power that are just, abusing their position, and they get away with it, right? Allah, He says, on a day of judgment, who are they going to bribe? Who are they going to pay off? Who are they going to run to? Because there is only one Allah. So let them never think that they will be able to escape. Now, when we believe that everything is under the control and the power of Al-Qadeer, now it will remove any fears and sadness in our heart. And it will not allow the fear and the sadness to take control. You will find some people that they become so depressed that it has taken over their rational thinking. That you will find some people, they get bullied online, and this is becoming an ever increasing endemic, I guess you could say. It's not a pandemic yet, right? This is becoming very, very common, where people do get bullied online, right? And you will find that it drives them. It takes over their life, right? You will find a person who is a practicing Muslim. You will find a person who is calling towards Allah, and then you will have all the haters talking down on them. And unfortunately, this person will, because maybe they are weak in iman, and they have just come into the religion or practicing of it, so it goes it overtakes their life. But we should never let our sadness overtake our life, take control over our life. And some people, it has made them to commit suicide and take their own life. Why is that? Because fear and sadness has taken control of their life. Now, when we have Iman in Al-Qadeer, the one who has the power and the ability, and he is capable of removing the sadness and fear from our heart, should we not ask him? Should we not ask him to remove it? That is the foundation of psychological health, right? You go to a psychiatrist and you explain to them for 45 minutes your problems, and what do they diagnose you with? Some acronyms, some names that only they know what it really means, and then they prescribe a drug for you that releases certain hormones in your bodies just to make you happy, or it suppresses those feelings of sadness. And then once the effect wears off, what happens to you afterwards? You're back to square one. Is that is how limited they are in why? Because they have completely removed from science and from medicine, they have completely removed Allah from the equation, completely. Alhamdulillah, we do have a great university such as UIA, right? Of course, it's not the top one according to the kuffar in the world. It's like 600 something. But for me, when it comes to this, I think it's probably number one in the world. Why? Because they combine the campus in Kuantan. That's where all the medical, and I think I may have some students on here who are medical doctors who are graduates from UIA in Kuantan. Right? What do? They teach them medicine, but they teach them medicine with an Islamic aqidah attached to it. That's how you go ahead and even their the oath that you take as a doctor, I forgot their name, is completely different. It's completely different. It's not yeah, I think it's called the Hippocrates or something like this. Some oath. If anyone knows the name of it or remembers it, you can type it up. But even that is an Islamic oath that they take, right? Whether you will find those doctors graduating from there practicing what they've learned, that's not a reflection of what the university is. My point is, I had in one class I had 3 students who are all graduates, and one of them is a psychiatrist. And mashallah, he's doing very well. He has written several books on the Islamic concept of psychiatry and how we can how one can cure himself from any problems or stress. He consulted me with certain aspects of that book. I gave him certain advice. This was probably about 3 years ago, right? His name is Dr. Zul Azleen, a very well-known psychiatrist here in Malaysia. Right? May Allah bless him. So back to our point, which is that no matter how dark your situation is, no matter how bleak your situation may appear to you, when you have faith in Al-Qadir, in Al-Qadeer, in Al-Muqtadir, 100%, he will pave a way for you out. He will give you a way out. When it seems that everyone else, everything else is lost and your hope in them is fruitless, right? When it seems like all hope is lost, then look at the situation or look at the example of Prophet Yunus alayhi salam, right? 3 times his name came up. 3 times. And when he was thrown offshore, when he was thrown outside of the boat or the ship in order to in order to lessen the weight or the burden on that ship or boat, when it seemed like everything was lost, he cried. He knew that this was from Allah. Let's backtrack just a little bit. Why was he put in that situation? It's because he lost hope that his people will ever come into the religion. He left the town without the permission of Allah. And when the punishment of Allah was about to come, they were seeing that they all repented, Allah saved them, and Allah put him in that situation in order to, as a lesson for all of us, right? So now when he is in that situation, he realized and he turned to Al-Qadeer. What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala he say in chapter 21 verse 87 through 88? Allah he says, وَذَنُّونِ إِذْ ذَهَبَ مُغَاضِبًا فَظَنَّ أَن لَّن نَّقْدِرَ. Right? So Allah he mentions his attribute of Qudra, of Al-Qadeer, of Al-Qadir. And remember when the is also another name of Yunus. And remember the i.e. Yunus alayhi salam, when he went off in anger and thought that we would not decree anything upon him. أَلَّن نَقْدِرَ, that we would not be able to, we are not capable or decree anything upon him. فَظَنَّ أَلَّن نَقْدِرَ عَلَيْهِ فَنَادَى فِي الظُّلُمَاتِ أَلَّا إِلَهَ إِلَّا أَنْتَ سُبْحَانَكَ إِنِّي كُنْتُ مِنَ الظَّالِمِينَ. But he cried through the darkness. The darkness of what? The darkness of the night, the darkness of the sea, and the darkness of the belly of that whale. He cried through the darkness saying, La ilaha illa anta subhanak inni kuntu min al-zalimin. None has the right to be worshipped but you. Glorified are you. Indeed, I have been of the wrongdoers. So and what does Allah say? And there is, for those of you who know the Arabic language, just a little bit, not too much. Let me just bring up to you something very important, right? And this is, it will tell you the beauty of it. It will tell you really the beauty of reading it or understanding it in the Arabic language. So let me share this with everyone, right? So this is the verse. وَذَنُّونِ إِذْ ذَهَبَ مُغَاضِبًا فَظَنَّ أَن لَّن نَّقْدِرَ عَلَيْهِ فَنَادَى فِي الظُّلُمَاتِ. So in the darkness, he kept on repeating, La ilaha illa anta subhanaka inni kuntu min al-zalimin. As a side note, this is one of the verses, or rather, this is one of the du'as that a person can recite when they are in distress. Okay, you can recite it as many times as you want. So what does Allah he say? So over here, the translation is, so we responded to him. But it doesn't tell you how fast did Allah respond. But if you look at the Arabic, it will tell you by just one letter. One letter tells you how fast Allah responded to his. Who can tell me? Sister Rahima, Sister Farah, any of the sisters who have taken the Arabic language with me so far, who can tell me?
Fa.
Very good.
Alphabet Fa.
Yeah, so Fa. Fa is the key that tells us how fast Allah responded to him. So, which means, Fa just means and or so. It means and, just like Wa means and, Fa means and so. Thumma means and, so. right? But they all tell you a different time frame. When you use the letter wa, it means that it comes concurrently, it comes at the same time. So that's not relevant here, because it's not like as he was making dua, Allah was accepting it. Fa means it came in succession immediately after one another. And means thumma means that it came after a long period of time. But Allah did not use thumma. It's not like he waited for years in order for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept his dua, his cry. So Allah is saying, as if Allah is saying, that anyone who recites La ilaha illa anta subhanaka inni kuntu min al-zalimin, when they are in distress, fastajabna, Allah, he is going to respond immediately. Right after your dua, Allah, he's going to respond to it. That is the qudra, that is the ability of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is how Allah, he is capable of answering our dua when we are in distress. Shouldn't that give us comfort in our du'as? Shouldn't that increase our iman in the name of Allah, in the names of Allah, and in our context, in this specific name? So Allah, he says, so we answered his call and delivered him from the distress, and thus we do deliver the believers. When we pray to Allah from the bottom of our heart, not from a absent mind, not from a mind that is not knowing what he's really asking, he's just parroting the du'as that he has memorized as a child. Allah doesn't listen to those du'as. You have to be asking Allah and concentrating on what you are asking. So when we make such a dua from the bottom of our hearts, and we are sincere that Allah is Al-Qadeer, Al-Qadir, and he has the power to respond to our dua, then you will find that Allah loves you for turning towards him. He will have mercy on you because of your situation, and he will give you contentment in your heart. Right? So Yunus alayhi salam, even though some of the tafasir, they say that he was in the belly of the whale for 40 days, yet Allah, and then you're like, how does that, how is it that Allah, he used fa? Shouldn't he have used thumma? Because 40 days, it only makes sense that Allah, he uses thumma because it was after 40 days that he was delivered from the belly. So Allah should have used the word or the particle thumma, not fa. Fa means like immediately, in succession, immediately one after another. No, it's 100% fa. Why? Because Allah gave him the contentment in the heart. And that is more important than actually physically removing someone from that distress. Because if you are physically not in problem, but mentally and in your heart you are troubled, then that is actually worse. And then you will find some people, especially like the prophets, physically they seem to be in hardship, but they are content. Like we see the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, physically he is thrown into the fire, physically he is being thrown out of his country. Musa alayhi salam, yet he says, Allah, he is with us. Right? Inna Allah, inna Rabbi ma'i sayahdeen. Right? We have the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. We have these Sahaba and these great people who were physically in distress, but Allah, and when they made that dua through Allah's name Al-Qadir and Al-Qadeer, Allah gave them contentment of the heart immediately, And then the worldly and the materialistic, the physical means, took its natural course. Took its natural course. Whether that is delivering them from poverty, for example. Okay? It's not like Allah made them the rulers of the earth on the first day when they accepted Islam. No, it took its natural course of 20 years, 25 years, 50 years, right? Why? Because that is how the world is made, to follow the natural, uh, uh, the natural course of things. But when it comes to the heart, Allah will give you immediately. He will decree for you, just like how Allah, He says over here. So we answered His call, meaning immediately we answered His call right after He made that dua, and we delivered him from the distress. Okay? So Allah, He removed, the first thing He did, He removed it from his heart. He gave him that contentment, that peace of mind. And that is only for the believers. Why is it only for the believers? Because like I mentioned, your dua will not be accepted if you are absent-minded. If your heart is absent from your dua, from the words that you are uttering. So we find Yunus alayhi salam being in total contentment in the belly of the whale. Right? So when Allah, He gives us peace of mind, right? And we said this is only for the believers who remember Him and those who believe in His powers. So what does Allah, He say with regards to this? In chapter 13, verse 28. Chapter 13, verse 28. Those who believe in the oneness of Allah, those who believe, and whose hearts find rest in the remembrance of Allah. Verily, in the remembrance of Allah do hearts find rest. So that's why what I mentioned here, right, that this is only for the believers, that contentment, that peace of mind, right, just like with Yunus alayhi salam. What's the proof for that? So the remembrance of Allah, everything that we have mentioned, all the du'as that we have mentioned, La ilaha illa anta subhanaka inni kuntu min al-zalimin, is a remembrance of Allah. It's a dua as well. Right? So Allah, He is guaranteeing that they will have a peace of mind. Those who believe, i.e. those who believe in that particular name and that particular dua, those who believe, they will find, their hearts will find rest in that particular dhikr and that particular dua. And Allah is saying, verily in the remembrance of Allah do hearts find rest. Any questions so far? Yes, it's Hippocratic. Yes, Hippocratic oath. Thank you, Sister Salwa. Yes, it's Hippocratic. Hippocratic oath. That's right. Any questions so far? All right. Moving on to the name of Allah, Al-Awwal. Al-Awwal. Al-Awwal is one of the names from amongst His numerous names. And it means the first, the foremost. Now, Allah, He is the one who is the first and foremost. He existed before anything existed and was the cause of everything to come into existence. Allah does not have a beginning. It is wrong for people to say that, yes, He was the first one to have a beginning. No, Allah does not have a beginning. He had no beginning, and nor will He have an end. And that is our other name that hopefully maybe we will get time to talk about tonight, which is Al-Akhir. So he had no beginning and he does not have any end. Now, it is hard for us to comprehend this because we have a beginning. That's why we cannot comprehend it. We just have to accept without using a rational explanation or our logic. We just have to explain. We just have to believe. Right. That is what part of Iman is. Actually, that is the first thing of Iman, that a person believes in something that they do not know, that they could not see, that they cannot really understand. How can Allah not have a beginning? Right? This is something no one has explained from the Islamic text because it does not exist. People have used philosophical reasoning, right, to explain it. Why? Because for one reason or another, maybe they couldn't, so they went on a quest to try to search for answers. Whether right or wrong, I'm not going to get into it. The point I'm making with regards to that, because this is not that type of a course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the first and he has no beginning. He's the foremost. And for us as humans, it is hard to comprehend this because we do not have we have a beginning, so we do not have the ability, the capacity to understand this, and we have an end, and therefore we cannot understand how Allah cannot or does not have an end. Now, but what we can say from an Islamic perspective is that it only makes sense that the one who we are worshiping, the one that claims to be worthy of worship, it is only proper that he has no beginning and he is self-existent. It only makes sense. It would not make sense for a person to claim that worship me, yet that individual, he is powerless. He cannot do everything. He has a beginning. He will have an end, right? It wouldn't make sense. Why am I worshiping you? Because there's someone who is going to be better than you in other regards. If you say because I can turn into this or I can do that or I can, no. If you have a beginning, you are not worthy of worship. Right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's why I've always mentioned throughout these names, okay, that because of this name, it is only proper that Allah has this name, and that's why He has chosen this name for Himself, and it makes Him worthy of worship. You tell me another God of any other religion, right, who can claim that our gods are like this, right? Some religions you will find that, hey, you know, oh, this person, he died, so he turned into this, so now he's a god. Or this other mythology has the idea, okay, this is the god of love and war and this, and yet you will find how one overtakes another in a battle. Like, why? Like, why should I worship the one who got overtaken? And if I'm in trouble, then go to the one that you used to fast for, because the one who you did not fast for will not answer. It's like, you know, back to being, you know, what's going on in this world, right? The one you voted for is not going, the one who you did not vote for is not going to help you. The one that you did not fund their campaign, their campaign with, is not going to help you. Right? And they're using that same logic when it comes to these gods. Like, it doesn't make sense. That's why the fact that Allah is one, it's only proper that we only worship one. Does that make sense? So Allah, He says in chapter 57, verse 3, chapter 57, verse 3, He is the first and He is the last. He's the most high, meaning nothing is above Him. and He's the most near. Nothing is nearer than Him, and He is the all-knower of everything. Allah, He says, هو الأول والآخر والظاهر والباطن وهو بكل شيء عليم وهو بكل شيء عليم. So the next four names of Allah, we will be the next four names in this course, we will be referring to this particular ayah. So it is worth your while to take note of this. Chapter 57, verse 3. And for those of you that are just joining this class for the first time, I have promised all of my students that whoever finishes this course, they will get this book for free. This is a book that I am currently writing and also teaching. They will get this book for free, inshallah. So even if I'm not discouraging you not to take notes. You should take notes because I go beyond what I have written. I know it's a bit weird that I'm explaining my my own writings, but I'm going beyond some of the things that, because I cannot talk about everything. Otherwise, this will be, instead of so far 162 pages, it will be probably 500 pages. Okay. So this is a verse that you should write down, chapter 57, verse 3, because for the next four names, Al-Awwal, Allah, He says, هو الأول والآخر والظاهر والباطن. Actually, this name, the translation I got this is probably not correct, right? This should be the most manifest, the manifest, okay? The manifest. Some translation, due to, I don't want to say it is wrong, because this is from a respectable, reputable translation. It's just that it is very hard, and I find myself actually doing quite a bit of research in trying to find. Of course, this is the easiest one, but others like the one that we just mentioned, Al-Qadeer, Al-Qadir, Al-Muqtadir, I find myself doing quite a bit of research trying to find the most appropriate, and yet maybe you will find someone else later on saying that my translation is probably not the most appropriate, his is, right? So I don't want to say this about this translation. To him, this is the most appropriate, but to me, it should be the most manifest, the one who manifests himself. Al-Zahir, right? Like Zahir. You guys have that in your, like Ma'af Zahir Dan Batin, right? In Salam al-Haridayah, you guys have that. What does that mean? Ma'af Zahir Dan Batin. That means forgive my outer and my inner. I think that's what it means, right? Forgive. What does it mean? Can someone tell me? I don't want to mess up. I cannot hear anyone, so you guys have to unmute. Let me unmute Brother Zulkifli. Nope, cannot unmute anyone. Okay, Brother Izzuddin, so it seems like it's correct. Okay, so that means like forgive my sins, both the outward and the inward, right? Meaning if I've ever backbited you in front of you or behind you, then forgive my sins. Okay, all right. Something like that. All right. Yeah, so you see why I am saying that is probably not the most correct translation, because it doesn't mean forgive my highest sin or something like that. What it means is the apparent sins and batin, the hidden sins. So that's what, anyway, when we come to that name, we will go ahead and mention it. I'll probably change this after class. Just do take note of it. Let me see the translation of it in 57:3. Yeah, so over here, this is another translation that they have, the ascendant and the intimate. This is according to this translation, Sahih International. And let's see what Muhsin Khan has, right? He says that the most, yeah, so Muhsin Khan is saying the most high and the most near. So let's see what Pickthall says. They say the same thing. Let's see what Mufti Taqi Usmani. Aha. So it seems like my translation is agreeing with Mufti Taqi Usmani. He's one of the greatest scholars of our time. He's from Pakistan. He was the Chief Justice of Pakistan. One of the greatest scholars of our time, especially when it comes to contemporary financial issues and banking. So he has written several books on it. He's a leading scholar when it comes to that. He's actually, you could say, a reference in our times. May Allah give him a barakah in his life and a long life with khair, inshallah. So he uses the manifest and the hidden, and that is what I tend to agree with, right? So that is what I would probably be changing that. Coming back to our topic, right? So the most manifest, or the manifest, and the hidden, and the hidden. And so coming back to the name of Allah, Al-Awwal, look at what the Prophet ﷺ, he says in hadith of Bukhari. The Prophet ﷺ, he says, there was Allah, and there was nothing else besides him. You see how the Prophet ﷺ says? Meaning there was Allah, that's it. He did not say, like, to suggest that Allah had a beginning. No. He said there was Allah, that's it. And there was nothing else besides him. And his throne was over the water. He wrote all things in the book that is with him in the heavens. And he created the heavens and the earth. All right. So this is a proof that and this is how much the Prophet ﷺ explained about Allah as Al-Awwal. He didn't go into any other rationale or anything. That's all. And if you want to be a believer, this is enough for you. That's it. So everything we know comes by the decree, by the qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he is the source of their existence. Since now I want you to pay attention to this, because this is just going to be a little bit of tricky, maybe because the way I have worded this. So just pay a bit attention to this. Look at what is being said. Since nothing cannot produce something, according to the philosophical argument of nothing comes from nothing, and according to the first law of thermodynamics, you can't get something from nothing. So far, so good? So there's a philosophical argument that says nothing comes from nothing, meaning you cannot produce anything. You cannot produce anything from nothing. And also the first law of thermodynamics says you cannot get something from nothing. So Al-Awwal is telling mankind that he is the originator of their creation because he is the first. So look at what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in chapter 52 verse 35. Look at what Allah he says in chapter 52 verse 55. Were they created by nothing, or were they themselves the creators? Or did they create the heavens and the earth? Nay, but they have no firm belief. Again, Allah he says, were they created by nothing, or were they themselves the creators? This argument or this question defeats the argument of these philosophers by their own argument, by their own laws. Allah, He's saying, how is it possible that you came out of nothing? You must have had an originator who was the first and foremost in order for you to come into existence. Or are you saying that you created the heavens and the earth? Because that's not possible either, since you never existed. So we all have a beginning because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He was the first and He was the source of our creation. Okay? And look at what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in chapter 6, verse 102. He says, that is Allah, your Lord. There is no deity except Him, the creator of all things. So worship Him, and He is the disposer of all things. All right. So what are some of the benefits that we can take from this name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Al-Awwal, the first, the foremost? Now, when we have firm belief in Allah as the first, as the foremost, it should always make us think positively of Him and turning to Him in all of our affairs. We should acknowledge the self-sufficiency of Al-Awwal. And we mentioned how Allah does not need any one of us. He is not providing for us so that way we can worship Him in return. No, He does not need it. He is self-sufficient. He is great not because of your fasting and of your worship. He is great because He is great. So when we acknowledge the self-sufficiency of Allah and His prior and His continuous grace and mercy upon us, then we will come to the realization that whatever Allah has decreed for us 50,000 years before the creation of the heavens and earth, we will be content with that. Why? Because we have acknowledged Allah and His prior and His continuous grace and mercy upon us. So if we are going through a pandemic, some of us may have lost a job. That does not mean you should lose hope in the mercy and in the grace of Allah, because what, for 20 years, 30 years, 50 years, He has been providing for you? Don't you think that He will continue to provide for you once this is over? Or is this the end of the world? Okay. Or is this the end of your belief? Or the limit, I should say, the limit of your belief in Allah. That when He provides for you, that you believe in Him and your iman is increased, but when He withholds from you, then you say that my Lord has abandoned me. Okay. So He's the first one that we should be turning to during times of hardship. Now let's look at how Ibn al-Qayyim, he describes Al-Awwal and how we can worship Allah through this particular name. He says, worshipping Allah in accordance with the meaning of Al-Awwal means that you do not pin your hopes on materialistic means and causes. And you are content with focusing on these materialistic causes and means. So what is he saying? In other words, he's saying that we should be turning our focus primarily and first, just like how Allah is Al-Awwal, we should make Him our means of turning our focus as as the primary focus. We should be turning to him. That we do not pin our hopes in anything or in anyone, because they have a beginning. And just like they have a beginning, they have an end. So what does that mean? That means then a time will come when you can no longer depend on those things, because those things no longer exist. So then where are you going to turn to? So is it not better that you turn to the one who has no beginning and he has no end, because then you will never be let down? This is what he's saying. So he's saying you should turn your focus completely to his generosity and mercy that preceded the existence of these means. Meaning that, like for example, what kind of a lawyer are you going to get to defend you? Are you going to get someone who just graduated, or are you going to get a veteran like Shafi, who charges 230,000 ringgits an hour? Are you going to get him? Of course, you're going to get someone like him to defend you. You're not going to get some graduate and he doesn't know what's going on. You're going to get someone who preceded. He probably even wrote the Constitution or wrote the laws. You're going to turn to that individual. So what Ibn al-Qayyim he's saying, that the generosity and the mercy of Allah preceded the existence of all of these materialistic means and causes. So it only makes sense that you turn to him first, because he is the first. It was he who showed kindness without any measures on your part. So he was the first to give you kindness without anything from you. Did we worship Allah when we were kids? We didn't know, nothing. But yet Allah, he's the first one to show us kindness. We had no power. We had no cognitive ability to recognize Allah. Yet he was the first one, just like how he was the first in his self-existence. He was the first when he showed us kindness and generosity before anyone, anything else. So he's saying he showed you kindness without any measures on your part, because you had no power to take any measures when you were nothing and did not exist. So he's actually even saying it before your existence. What measures could possibly be available at that time when you were absolutely nothing? Okay. And then he mentions this particular verse in chapter 76, verse 1. Chapter 76, verse 1. هل أتى على الإنسان حين من الدهر لم يكن شيئا مذكورا. Has there not been a period of time over man when he was nothing to be mentioned? So Allah, he's saying that there was a period of time in which this person, no one knew him. 1 year before you were born, did anyone say, okay, there's going to be a boy by the name of Ali, and he's going to grow up like this, and no one knew you. No one mentioned you. No one knew your existence. No one even knew you were going to come into existence. That is what Allah is saying. That has there not been over man a period of time when he was nothing to be mentioned? And some of the scholars said that there also going to come a time after your death, after your demise, because you are not akhir, you are not going to be the last. That there's going to come a time in which people will not remember you and mention you because you have been forgotten. Only rare, and I will talk about who are those rare people that will be mentioned long after they have died from this world. I will mention who are those people, because those are the people that practiced upon the name of Allah, Al-Akhir, which is going to be mentioned after this. Okay. Now, it is a proven fact that whenever an individual had put someone or something before Al-Awwal, that person was let down or disgraced by that very something or someone. It is proven. No one can deny this. It is a proven fact that whenever we put our trust on someone, that person has let us down. Whenever we have put our trust in our ability, that our ability has let us down during our lifetime, has disgraced us. Now, I mentioned this before. It could be as a mercy from Allah to wake you up. Don't do that. Turn to me. Depend on me. And the sooner you realize this, the sooner you turn towards Him, the better it is for you. So if you put your job before praying to Al-Awwal, your job will be a means of your misery. If you put your wealth before acquiring it from, whether it's from halal or from haram source, or paying your zakat, your wealth will be a cause of your bankruptcy, at least in the akhirah, if not in this world. Some people, they see zakat, and this is one of the signs of the Day of Judgment, they will see zakat as a burden. If you put pleasing others before pleasing Al-Awwal, you will be humiliated by them. You will be humiliated by them. Look at what the Prophet ﷺ, he says. And this hadith is in At-Tirmidhi and Sahih Ibn Hibban. The Prophet ﷺ, he says, whoever seeks Allah's pleasure at the expense of men's pleasure, meaning the people, will win Allah's pleasure, and Allah will cause these people to be pleased with him. So whoever seeks to please Allah at the expense of the people's displeasure, meaning by making people upset, then you will win Allah's pleasure, and Allah will eventually cause those people to be pleased with you. And whoever seeks to please men at the expense of Allah will win the displeasure of Allah, and Allah will eventually cause those people to be displeased with him. I remember a story. There was an individual who was applying for a job that required him to be in possession of multi-million-dollar equipment. But he had a beard. So during the interview, the CEO, he said, for this position, we would like for you to shave your beard. And the guy was like, this is part of my religion. I can't do it. So the person said, and he really needed a job, but he remained steadfast. He said, this is the sunnah of the Prophet. I'm doing this to please Allah as a means of me trying to resemble the Prophet ﷺ. So he remained steadfast. So that individual, he went back home, and Shaitan started playing with him. He said, it's just a beard, just get your foot in the door and then go ahead. And so he went ahead and he shaved that beard, trying to please that and win over that job. So he emailed the person and he said, I went ahead. So during the interview, he was like, this is part of my religion. I do this, to follow the Prophet and this. So the guy, he said, think about it, let me know. So he went home and, unfortunately, Shaitan was playing with him. So he went ahead and shaved his beard, and he messaged and emailed the person. He said, all right, I decided to do so. And I'm ready to start. The guy said, we have no need for people like you, because if you are willing to do this and go against your principles and do this and go against your religion, then imagine me and my company. What will you do to hurt us and cause us, failure, or if you let down your principle and your religion, then you would not have any backbone to uphold our principle as a company. What happened? Wasn't it in Allah's hands? So it was written in the qadr that this person was not going to get a job. How was he going? What was the reasoning for him not getting a job? That was in his qadr. Khalas, he's not getting a job. What was the reasoning? That's up to you. How you're not going to get a job or how you are going to get a job, that's up to us. We mentioned this in the qadr class. Like, it's written we're going to make $1 million in our lifetime, for example. Let's say it's written in your qadr. How you are going to earn that, that is up to you. How? Stealing, cheating, working in a haram institution. How are you going to do that? That's up to you. You're not going to earn 999,000. You're not going to earn 1,100,000. You're not going to do that. You can't, because that's not in your qadr. So for him not having that job, that was written. How was he able? Imagine if he appeared before Allah and he said, I did not get that job to get I put you as the first. Imagine how pleased Allah would be with him. How pleased Allah will be with him. Now compare that with, I did not get that job because I did this. I removed my hijab, for example. I shaved my beard. Or I didn't pray. I didn't go for Jummah prayers. Over here, alhamdulillah, we have it very, very easy. Very easy. MashaAllah, the Jummah lunch break here in Malaysia is 2 hours. Okay? I suffered a great deal. Half an hour of lunch break. That's it. And then I told them I have to take 1 hour minimum. And that 1 hour would stretch to 1.5 hours, because by the time you travel, Ya Allah, I'm very happy those days are over for me. Alhamdulillah, living in a country that allows you or facilitates the practice of your religion is a ni'mah that people do not realize living in that country unless they have lived elsewhere. Anyway, so when we always place Al-Awwal as our first priority in our daily life, right, then you will see how happy and joyous your life will be. You will find yourself always placing Allah before you. Allah will give you a priority, whether it's in this world or whether it's in the hereafter. Allah will give you preference over everyone else. That is how you could make yourself and seek comfort and solace and happiness through the name Al-Awwal. Look at what the Prophet ﷺ, he says. Pay attention to this hadith. Whoever is concerned about the hereafter, meaning he places the hereafter as his priority, Allah will place richness in his heart, even if he's poor. No, remember I told you the physical aspects are not that important. If you are rich in your heart, but you have nothing, because that nothing is going to, because for something to come is going to take its natural course, let it, as long as you're still rich in your heart. Okay? And even if it doesn't come about, the physical means, but as long as you're rich in the heart, alhamdulillah. So you have to pay attention to the wording of the Prophet ﷺ. So the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever is concerned about the hereafter, Allah will place richness in his heart, brings his affairs together, and the world will come to him even though he is reluctant for it. Meaning, even if he doesn't want it, the world is still going to come to him. And whoever is concerned about the world, Allah will place poverty between his eyes. He's always going to see, even though the guy is retired, even though he is getting a pension, during a time like this, he's still going to be worried. Oh my gosh, how am I going to live? How long is this pandemic? What if the government reduces my pension? Like, that is his world, his worry. So why? Because his main concern, his first concern, his priority is this world. So he will say, Allah will place poverty between his eyes, disorder his affairs, and he will get nothing of the world except what is decreed for him. That's it. Meaning all he's worried about is world. Let me go ahead and accumulate more. Let me go ahead and make more. Make more. He's not going to make anything more than what has already been set aside for him of this world. So wouldn't it be better if we made the hereafter as our priority, Allah as Al-Awwal? He is Al-Awwal, but is He Al-Awwal in our hearts, in our dealings with Him? When we are the first and foremost in executing the commands of Allah, you will be given happiness in this world and the next. How? Look at what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says that you will be the chosen servants and made to inherit His bounty. Look at what Allah, He says, and those foremost. So this is how we can go ahead and act upon the name Al-Awwal. That, okay, we have a beginning, so there's no way we can be the first, right? That it doesn't suit us. It's only for Allah. But we can go ahead and practice upon that name by being the first, the forerunners, the foremost in what? In doing good deeds. So for example, if someone needs help, right? And they send a message and say, I need someone to help me get from point A to point B. You are the first one to help him. That's what it means to be the foremost. You're the first one to finish in a test. You are the first one to answer the question in your classroom. That's what it means by being the foremost. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when it comes to the religion, whoever is the first one to accept Islam, or at least from the batch of the first one. At least from the batch of the first one. You are the first one. Look, the people who were the first one to stand to British colonization, right, and seek independence, those individuals, up until now, at least their progeny and they are the ones who are in power, right? Not the ones who comes later on. Why? They are the ones. They were the founding individuals of a country, or of Malaysia, for example, in this instance, right? Those individuals, I think, except for Mahathir, was probably an exception. But nonetheless, you guys all know what I'm talking about with regards to the others, right? They're always in there. Why? Because they have to their credit that we were the first one, therefore we know how to go ahead and do it. So they are reaping the fruits of that. So look at what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He also says in chapter 35, verse 32 to 35. Then we cause to inherit the book those we have chosen of our servants. And among them, so who are those servants? Allah, He describes three different types. So which one are you? So Allah, He says, among them is he who wrongs himself. فَمِنْهُمْ ظَالِمٌ لِنَفْسِهِ وَمِنْهُمْ مُقْتَصِدٌ. He is moderate, right? Rings a bell? He's moderate. And among them is he who is foremost in good deeds by the permission of Allah. That inheritance, meaning to inherit, is what is the great bounty for them, meaning for those foremost, are gardens of perpetual residence which they will enter. They will be adorned therein with bracelets of gold and pearls, and their garments therein will be silk. And they will say, praise to Allah who has removed from us all sorrow. Indeed, our Lord is forgiving and appreciative. He has settled us in the home of duration out of His bounty. There touches us not in it any fatigue, and there touches us not in it any weariness. So over here, this is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make you to be His chosen servant and make you inherit His bounties. That's all we have. Are there any questions? Any questions? Okay. I cannot hear anyone, and maybe it's because I have muted everyone, but you could go ahead and unmute yourself. Otherwise, you can write it down in the chat. You can unmute. If not, then you can put it in the chat. Otherwise, we will go ahead and end this session. All right. So if there's no questions, then we'll go ahead and call it a night. I was going to mention something. Khair, if I remember, I'll mention it in the chat. Jazakallah khair. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through His beautiful names of Al-Qadeer, Al-Qadir, Al-Muqtadir, and Al-Awwal. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us, to forgive us, to guide us, to always place Him as the first, to make us from amongst the forerunners, to make us from amongst the foremost those that inherit His bounty in the hereafter. May Allah make us from amongst was-sabiqun as-sabiqun ulaika al-muqarrabun, the forerunners and the foremost who will go ahead and be the closest servants of Allah, and to be from amongst the forerunners that enter into Jannah. May Allah guide us, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala always guide us to obey Him. May Allah give us the ability to always worship Him and never give us the ability to ever disobey Him. May Allah remove from us all forms of hardship and all sorrow. May Allah give us comfort the way He gave comfort to the prophets, the way He gave comfort to Prophet Yunus. May we remember him in times of ease, in times of difficulty. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala change our affairs for the good. Give us contentment in our heart. Give us peace of mind. Remove from us all of our fears and replace our fears with happiness. May Allah give us full belief in His qudra, in His ability and His power and His power and His capabilities. May Allah never allow us to lose hope and become despair in His power. Jazakallah khair. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. رب اغفر وارحم وأنت خير الراحمين.